I'm following in the shadow of Margaret, who's given us a great presentation of all that she's been doing with many of our sisters and other collaborators at the level of the UN in New York. Now I want to share with you something what I have been mandated to do and trying to do and collaborate in doing. So the aim of this session, and why we inserted it into the program, is to enable all of us and all of you to assess our current engagement in the UN as Dominicans. So we'd like you to really be listening to all that I'm saying, that Margaret has said, with a very critical eye and a critical ear, so that you can come up with things that can help us to improve and to improve our presence and to improve our impact at the level of the UN. Because we have so much expertise and so much resource in this room that I think that it's a marvelous opportunity that we would welcome any critical perspectives and constructive proposals for how we can improve things and strengthen our mission. So as you look at what I've been doing and I and the delegation that I'm part of, I first want to just give a quick bit of history. Since only NGOs can be accredited to the UN, religious orders cannot be. An NGO of the Dominican order had to be established, which was done in 1998 as Dominicans for Justice and Peace. And this was set up at the instigation of the International Dominican Commission for Justice and Peace, which meets every year or two or three, and we'll be meeting, in fact, immediately after this Congress here in Salamanca, the same commission. The first permanent delegate of the order was Philippe Laban from Canada, and he developed a very close collaboration with Franciscans International and with the Justice and Peace promoter in Rome, starting off with Jean-Jacques Perronez, followed by Pablo Romo and Prakash Lohale. He focused mainly on, in that period, they focused on Pakistan, Iraq, the death penalty, indigenous people in Mexico, Rwanda, Puerto Rico, many other things, but those are some of the key ones that they focused on and had quite an impact on. The second permanent delegate was Olivier Poquillon from France. And together with Evelyn van Steffens and the Justice and Peace promoter at that period, Carlos Linera, who is with us today here, he focused mainly in that period on Iraq for 6 years, on Iraq, the right to development, the right to education, the rights of the child, Gaza, Haiti, and the Salamanca process, among several other things. But I think those are the main types of things. So, as I have stepped into their shoes, I have embarked on a certain process, and I've outlined my talk today in terms of the different steps that I have taken in order to realize the mandate that I've been given. And this is where it'll be useful to get your feedback on these steps that I have taken and to see how we can enrich and deepen them. So the first step I took when I began this task in January 2014, just over 2.5 years ago, my first step was to communicate with Dominicans everywhere, to identify what the main issues on the ground are. Bearing in mind that my mandate was I have to be advocating for the issues that our Dominicans on the ground are dealing with, so we don't have a disconnection between what we are doing at the level of the UN and what people are doing on the ground. Because there was a feeling that too often people on the ground have no sense about how the UN relates to them. And we have to break down that barrier that exists. The second step, from the responses that I got, and I got many responses, and I want to thank many of you who were part of those, I drew out two main priorities for our advocacy. The first main priority is the issue of war and peace. Bear in mind that we have Dominicans that are living in situations of extreme difficulty, war and violence and conflict. The question was, how can we show solidarity with them living in those situations? So that has emerged as the first main priority. And we realize that there's several interactive issues that relate to that one priority. Because of these war situations, a big issue is the question of disarmament. All the weapons and the arms trade that are fueling all these wars. So we thought if we're going to be responding to what people are doing, we have to engage at a root cause level, which is the production and the traffic of arms. A second related issue is the issue of freedom of religion. Because so many wars these days are using religion as the pretext for the wars, the whole issue about the role of religion, and especially the freedom of religion within that, has loomed as a big thing. So we have focused on that. Obviously, for the same reason, we've seen the importance of focusing on interreligious dialogue as a way to be engaging with that same problem. Then another issue, which at first we thought was a separate priority, but we realized we didn't have the capacity to have too many priorities. It's the issue of migration, which we saw as a consequence, in a way, of these war situations. So we would be dealing with that insofar as it is related as a consequence. The second priority that we identified is the area of business and human rights. That's the language that's used in the UN about it. And this area of business and human rights is all about challenging transnational corporations, the impunity that they enjoy in their operations, in the extractive industries, land grabbing, going and buying up huge tracts of land through complicity with governments, and robbing people of land that they've been living on for centuries. They come in and they just destroy environments with no concern other than their profits. We've seen that as one of the priority areas that we need to be focused on, because Dominicans on the ground increasingly are very involved in this. Also related to this is the importance of countering climate change, because all these things I mentioned earlier contribute in a great way towards the conditions that are resulting in the climate change. And similarly, the destructive energy sources that are being used, they use the pretext we all need energy, and we all agree we need energy, and they can justify no matter what sort of terrible thing, because what else can we do? We all have to keep the lights on. How to engage in energy sources that are not destructive. And of course, the biggest victims in all these situations are the indigenous people, and that's why indigenous people's rights has loomed as a big issue that we focused on related to this. So this is a collection of issues which seem to be very closely interconnected. And of course, the human trafficking issue, which could be something again on its own right, but we see it as in some ways part of this international global business that is done with impunity, and one could lump it under the migration issue as well, but we obviously see that as a crucial issue we've got to be dealing with. These two issues are what we identified as issues that we would make an effort to initiate responses to. We made a distinction between issues with which we would initiate and issues that we would follow. Because there are so many issues, including coming from the ground, that we're called on to respond to. But we can't deal with everything. And we know that we're not working alone. As Margaret said, we have to work in collaboration with people all the time. So we have been working in collaboration, especially in the Geneva context, but also now as we're branching out into other places like Vienna, and I'll come to that later, and Nairobi, but the idea is the others are also dealing with these issues, and many of them are taking a lead on them. So if they are taking a lead, there's no need for us to do the same thing, to reinvent the wheel. So we will co-sign issues with them, we'll engage with them on it, we'll engage in discussions, but we won't necessarily be in the front line initiating these issues. And you know, I'm talking about the issues like the child rights, the right to development, the right to education, all of which are crucial things for us. So that's an important distinction between initiating and following that we've made. Then having done that, as identified the priorities, my third step was now to identify which of the UN mechanisms and other international institutions where we can advocate for these issues. And to do that, I traveled around all the major UN centers, and I want to just quickly refer to those. So the first center was Geneva. That's where our delegation has been primarily based ever since it was set up in 1990. Well, it's from the association was formed in 98, but Philippe Leblanc was in Geneva from the end of 1996. So he was based in Geneva, and that's been our main focus of activity. And there's, you see some pictures of I mentioned the other day, the Francisco de Vitoria Hall in Geneva, and that's it over there. And that's what the main Human Rights Council hall looks like at a time when I was delivering a statement. And there, you won't guess who that is up there. Laurence, who's just started working with us 6 months ago. Then New York disappeared off this thing. It should be New York on the top of the UN headquarters, which, and I'm collaborating with Margaret from time to time, and we're able to, and as I mentioned the other day, in the grounds of the New York the UN, you see a statue of Francisco de Vitoria, saying he's a fundador del derecho de gente, so he's the founder of the rights of people. Then I also visited Vienna, and in Vienna we've set up a small team, also to be engaging there, and we have Toby from the team who's here with us today. He's also in this picture, although this was taken about a year or two ago. I don't know if you still look the same, Toby. But in Vienna, the focus is on drugs, crime, corruption, and human trafficking. And I'll come back to that in a moment. So we've got a small team of Dominican laity, especially at this point. There have been some friars and sisters, but they're all quite occupied and haven't been able to be too involved lately. But we're trying to engage there. Then also Nairobi, which is the 4th UN center, and that's where the UN Environmental Program, UNEP, and the UN Housing Program, or UN Habitat, are based. And there we also have we've developed a small team there, and the coordinator of the team is also here, our brother Mulu, and another member, a newer member of the team is Dieudonné, who you've also seen. So 2 of them are here today as well. So we hope to get all of our people working in the UN together before the end of this meeting to see how we can develop a synergy amongst us. Besides these, I've also been thinking about, since Dominicans are almost everywhere, if we can, we should be trying to develop a presence wherever such UN or other international institutions exist. So, for example, the UNESCO in Paris, FAO in Rome. In Washington, we have the US Congress, we have the Organization of American States. In Brussels, we have the European Union. In Addis Ababa, we have the African Union. In Jakarta, you got ASEAN. And you can go on. There are many other places. In Costa Rica, there's the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. We could go on and on. There are many places where we could be involved. And the important thing is, can we find brothers and sisters with energy to engage at those levels? I've tried in some of these places, but have struggled to find people who would have the energy to engage with some of these. So if any of you have ideas, and if you, maybe yourselves or others who are prepared to engage at that level, because it needs people local to engage with those things, please let us know. So that was the third step, to get to know the scene and where we could be involved. Then the fourth step, I engaged in country visits with three main objectives. Firstly, to show solidarity, especially in places where there was wars and violence, and where our brothers and sisters are living under very difficult conditions. Secondly, to develop personal relationships, to be able to advocate on behalf of people. I've realized you need to know them personally. When you just communicate through email, it's very difficult to really develop a clear rapport, and it's been borne out. Almost all the places where I've got to know people, the interaction and the advocacy has managed to improve dramatically. And the third point is to identify in situ, in the situation, what are the key advocacy points that we should try and engage with from that level. The fifth step then was to try and strengthen Dominican capacity on the ground. Because, as you said, our advocacy at the UN level is only as good as our engagement on the ground. So we can't really do much at the UN level if you're doing nothing on the ground. And we have to show that integral connection. We can only say there what you tell us to say effectively. And so to be able to increase capacity is very vital. So I've done that in many ways. I've given many talks and workshops on justice and peace, and especially on the spirituality of justice and peace, and therefore how it connects as an integral part of evangelization to all that we're doing, the sorts of things that I spoke about yesterday. And I've been very grateful that almost all the entities I've been to, I've been welcomed by provincials, by regents, by student communities, etc., and I've been able to engage with our Dominicans on the ground there. Then another part of the building capacity is the importance of creating structures of justice and peace. And that's where identifying justice and peace promoters, that they exist everywhere. And I think that there's been a great improvement in the consolidation of justice and peace promoters and appointment of them in many parts of the world. And then also we're trying to develop or strengthen our International Justice and Peace Commission to have more teeth. And that's hopefully something we will do in the meeting after this. And a very integral part of all that was the organization of this Congress as well. And in many of these things, I'm collaborating with our sister Tina, who you all know. Another part of this increasing capacity, I've been trying to also enable exposure to some of the key issues that are happening, to help our people on the ground to be able to engage with them. So the one is the issue of land grabbing that our brother Anyedi, who's also here somewhere, he is leading the Africa Faith and Justice Network based in Washington, but he organizes a big conference on land grabbing in Africa. And we managed to get, as you can see, several of our brothers there, virtually all of which, only one of them is not here. So you can find all of the rest hovering around here. And hopefully that is helping to increase our understanding and awareness, and hopefully it will enable our Dominicans from our entities to become more involved. Similarly, the climate change issues, as Margaret mentioned, we've seen it very important to be involved in those questions, and so we encouraged Dominicans from all over the world to come to Paris last year, and we had a good delegation of more than 20 Dominicans, and there you can see some of them in that picture there, and some in the march down below. We had lay Dominicans, brothers and sisters there. Also, as has been mentioned by Emmanuel this morning, we had this workshop for the Great Lakes of Africa, the Great Lakes region, we had it in Kenya last year, in which we brought together all these brothers and sisters you see there, and many of whom are in the room here today, to see how we can consolidate Dominicans to start working together for peace in this area that's been suffering wars for decades and decades. Then I've also been wanting to bring Dominicans to Geneva to have an exposure there, so that Dominicans can, the more people who have exposure and some sort of training there, the greater we can engage in things back home. And several of you have come here. I've got the one photo of our one brother, Samuel, who came just the most recently. And others will be coming next week. So that was all about building capacity. Then the sixth step is the need to be developing relationships with UN mechanisms and UN people, because clearly advocacy is all about relationships. So unless we can get to know them and be accepted by them and be credible to them, we're never going to have any impact. So we've had to spend quite a lot of time engaging with certain ambassadors, certain missions, different people in different capacities in the UN, special rapporteurs, etc. And this is an example at the side event we had where people, different ambassadors or mission people from different missions came, and we had special rapporteurs speaking. The seventh step is then to identify the key entry points where we can do that advocacy. And having seen things all over the world, I've identified, and we've identified, certain priority areas. The first one is the Human Rights Council in Geneva, where we have started trying to make more and more interventions. We have been trying to get issues from the ground that we want to make statements about. So recently we've been making statements about Burundi, about Iraq, about minority issues, about the Dominican Republic in relation to the operation of multinationals, etc. So we can make statements in that context. And then, as has been mentioned several times, the Universal Periodic Review, the UPR, is something that we wanted to be engaged a lot more in. And there's one coming up soon, and we're engaging with our brothers and sisters in Brazil and in Philippines to be able to make contributions towards this in the coming months. Then also, the special rapporteurs are a very important mechanism there. These are independent experts who will respond to issues as you raise them. So we've been engaging with several special rapporteurs about some of the issues. The most recent one was the one of the Dominican Republic, where our brothers and sisters have been engaged. And then the treaty bodies, like the conventions, and we started to engage with those as well. I would love us to get more involved in the Security Council in New York. We've been in discussion with Margaret about that. It's a bit of a question of capacity. So we hope that we can find more people available to help us to do that, because there's an NGO working group on Security Council where I would love us to be present. Then in Vienna, we have the UN Office of Drugs and Crime, and I was just there a few months ago, and we concluded that the focuses that we would have there would be on prison reform and the death penalty. And then in Nairobi, the Environmental Assembly is a structure which is in the process of transformation, and the structure will eventually be very similar to the Human Rights Council in Geneva. So it'll enable more activity or intervention from NGOs. So I'm hoping that we can strengthen our Nairobi team so we can start getting more involved there, as well as UN Habitat, which is there. And my main final points would be around advocacy engagements and impacts. So what have we done now? Having identified all those ground things, how have we tried to engage? The first one, and I think we've heard some of these before, so I'll go quickly through them. In relation to Sri Lanka, we collaborated with several, especially Catholic NGOs, but others as well, to advocate for the release of a human rights defender and a good friend of ours, Ruki Fernando, and all that advocacy work to result in their release very quickly. Similarly, in Colombia, when our sister Maritza, who is present amongst us here, where are you, Maritza? When Maritza, who's doing amazing work in Trujillo to defend working with the victims and the families of the massacres in Colombia, she received many death threats, and we engaged with the ambassadors of Colombia in Geneva and the Holy See, requesting more protection for her and her colleagues. we believe they were offered that protection, even though she refused to accept it. But at least what we were advocating for seemed to be succeeding. Then our brothers in Peru are working with indigenous people in the jungle, as I mentioned yesterday, and we've been trying to engage with the ambassador of Peru and the mission there to start listening to what those indigenous people are looking for, and we believe that they have started some sort of communication. In Pakistan, we highlighted the tragedy of a Christian couple that was killed after being accused of blasphemy, and we put a high-profile donor in the US in touch with them to help purchase a house for their 3 small children, and that gave more publicity to the issue. In Iraq and in Syria, we've organized several things. Immediately after the ISIS invasion, we can say, in August 2014, we issued a letter signed by the Master of the Order, which was sent to all the delegations in Geneva, urging the international community to take us more seriously. As we know, they didn't. So we weren't too successful there. But we've continued to advocate for Iraq, and we've organized a side event on this issue at the end of last year, focusing on the lack of political will. And we had a lot of people attending, including 8 states. A big focus of us has been Burundi, especially in the last year, the last 9-10 months. We've had a lot of focus on Burundi since things have exploded there, and we've organized a side event in March this year around the issue, and we've made many statements and worked very closely with our brothers in Burundi, especially Emmanuel, and we're going to be doing something again in a couple of weeks, again in Geneva, focusing on the need for protecting people and especially to have an inclusive dialogue. In the USA, at the end of last year, we tried to launch a bit of a mercy campaign for Richard Masterson, who was on death row in Texas, and our brothers and sisters helped to spread the word, to have a campaign which unfortunately failed, and he was executed in January this year. So we don't always succeed. In the Dominican Republic, and this is what I was mentioning earlier, we've sent an urgent appeal to the Special Rapporteur, trying to get the company, Central Romana, to recompense the people evicted there for the houses they've destroyed. And we've supported events and statements advocating for human rights in the Congo, in Myanmar, in West Papua, Central African Republic, Sri Lanka, so many other things which I don't have time to go into here. Just more recently, we had a side event on encryption and the right to privacy in collaboration with Optic, which is our Dominican communications team, led by our brother Eric Salubir. And we organized this in Geneva, which attracted a lot of interest as well, because no governments are very interested in encryption because it hammers their security needs. So in conclusion, how do we assess what we're doing there? I would say that what we're doing is just a little drop in the ocean as Dominicans so far. I think certainly in the Geneva context, since Laurent started working with us, we've had a lot more capacity in our office, which I didn't have alone, and we're able to engage a lot more. We've started engaging with so many of you. We have many things on the table in Colombia, in Brazil, in the Philippines, and Dominican Republic, etc. So we're hoping that we can strengthen those, and we urge all of you to be engaging with us so that we can, to let us know how we can work with you. The more energy that comes from your side, the more likely we're able to do things from our side. The problem, of course, is we still have a capacity issue. Even though Laurence is full-time for us there, we're still struggling to cope with all the many demands. But hopefully, with the Master of the Order, as Bruno said on the first day, we're hoping to strengthen our team, especially in Geneva, and I hope we can even branch out to other places as well. And another big challenge especially has been communication, because we we have started addressing that issue, because without good communication, making the world know about this, a lot of what we do gets lost. So we can do with a lot more help at that level. So if any of you are interested or keen to be involved in communication things, please speak to Laurence and myself. We would love to do it.